Well, you know, it has been a theme on Varney and Company for a long time. That is the long list of new rules that's crippling small business. We call it Regulation Nation, not just because it rhymes, because it's real. Here are the numbers. Since President Obama took office, 11,327 pages have been added to the Code of Federal Regulations. And those regs come with a cost, $488 billion a year. That's according to the American Action Forum. All rise. The judge is here. His name is Andrew Napolitano. Judge, welcome.
Thank you, Stuart.
There's nothing wrong legally or constitutionally with new federal regulations, is there?
Well, there's nothing wrong legally because the Congress has created these administrative agencies, like, say, the EPA or the Federal Aviation Administration. Constitutionally, there's a great dispute about whether Congress can delegate its core function, which is to make law, because these regulations, once they are promulgated in the Federal Register, which means a bureaucrat has written them and the White House has signed off on them, once they appear in the Federal Register for 30 days, if they're not vetoed by both houses of Congress, then they become law.
Okay, wait a second. So what you're saying is Congress should pass a law which is full, absolutely full. No rules and regulations to be written separately. No, it's right there, and that's what you vote on.
Well, you see, the Constitution says all, I'm emphasizing the word with tone of voice, all legislative authority herein granted shall be vested in a Congress. Justice Scalia has argued, and I agree with him, that that means that the Congress cannot give away to some other body legislative authority, which is the ability to write law. So when the EPA comes up with a regulation about how many particles per billion can be harmful, or when the FAA says if you spill some oil on a tarmac at an airport, you got to clean it up within 30 seconds. If the Congress doesn't veto those, they have the same force of law as if written by the Congress.
But they must have been challenged 100,000 times on the constitutional basis.
Well,
and you've lost every time.
Very, very good question. When the Congress wrote this Administrative Procedures Act, which lets these administrative agencies do this, it gave them such discretion that the only way the courts can interfere with this rulemaking by these administrative agencies is when that discretion is abused. That is a very high standard for the challenger of the regulation.
It's a subjective statement, too, isn't it?
Precisely. The other problem is, as you pointed out in either your tease or your intro, Congress doesn't read these regulations.
Right.
If Congress doesn't like what the EPA is doing, Congress can undo it. But let me finish. If Congress doesn't know what the EPA is doing because they're too lazy to read the regulations, we'll all suffer.
Hot button issue, because if these people are working for us, how can they pass something that they haven't read and that they can attest that they know what's in there and we're supposed to follow?
I love your Jeffersonian attitude. They are working for us in our minds, not in their minds. In their minds, they tell us how to live and they tell us what to do.
So how do we change that? I mean, how do we get the American people to rise up and say enough is enough? We're paying for you. You work for us. You need to do the things.
You elect people like Stuart Varney to the United States Senate.
Well, how do I come into this?
Are you running a store?
Come on, Charles, get it.
When the Supreme Court gives the power, this is what the Clean Air Act, to create an agency that supersedes Congress. How do you get around that? In other words, the Supreme Court has essentially has given the EPA supersized power now that it overrules Congress.
Okay, it is the Congress has allowed the EPA to do this, and the Supreme Court has declined to interfere. You make a great point, and the EPA is a great example, because the EPA under President Obama promulgated regulations that showed up in the Federal Register, sat there for 30 days. The Congress and the House didn't object, so then they went into the Code of Federal Regulations and became law.
But can they even object? That's the point. Can they object?
Those very regulations had been rejected by the Congress.
So they don't have any power. The Congress has no power over the EPA.
They do if they were willing to exercise it. They lack the will and they lack the discipline to understand what the EPA is doing.
Out of time. A good one, though. Jeffersonian Carol Roth. Excellent stuff. All right. Thank you, Judge.
I'm not the only one in the building.
No, you're not. Always appreciated. All right, everybody. My take on the president's activities this past week.